Hello, Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and we're doing another edition of the Facebook Live. We're going to probably start doing this every Tuesday, and I'm really excited because today we're going to be talking about the number one principle that must be understood if you have any hope of recovering from an adrenal fatigue nightmare. And I'll even go as far as saying that if you don't understand this principle, then you're pretty much setting the foundations that you won't achieve a full recovery with an adrenal fatigue nightmare. So let's dive in. What is this number one principle? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you. Love seeing those thumbs up and those likes and those shares. That makes me feel real special. When we get more fancy, I'm actually going to write these backwards. So I'm sorry you're seeing that backwards, or I'll have my phone turned the other way. I don't know how to do that just yet, but I will do that at some point in time. So anyways, what I wanted to talk to you today about is the number one principle that is responsible for understanding if you have any hope of recovering with an adrenal fatigue nightmare. So let's dive in, shall we? So today I wanted to talk to you about Hans Selye. He has these books, The Stress of Life. He has Stress Without Distress. And I even read his autobiography. And this is The Stress of My Life. So I really think Hans would be really happy with me because I am trying to take the torch from where he left off and propel us into the new century. And so for those of you who know who Hans Selye is or who don't know who he was the father of the stress theory. And he was the one who really coined the term stress, and he had a lot of stress trying to prove his theory, but he had this theory that all human illness or all human conditions that impact the health have a general type of response. And he was laughed at and he was ridiculed because how could it be that all these other diseases have a general response when they're very specific? And so what he did is he came up with three main stages of stress. The first one is the alarm phase, and this is when we're under a lot of stress and signals get sent to us that there's something going on in our body. And then we have the resistance phase where ultimately we are up against the alarm and we're resisting it. And then we have the exhaustion phase. And so when we have, thanks Sarah, I really appreciate that. When we have a model like that, we have an alarm, we have a resistance, and we have an exhaustion phase. It points a good understanding of what stress is, and then we sort of base our recovery around that. And so the other thing that I see a lot of is that we do adrenal testing, and people ask me all the time, hey, what stage of stress do you think I'm in? Do you think I'm in sort of a type, am I category 2? Am I category 3? Am I in complete fatigue? Am I in a heightened acute phase? And that's where you're going wrong. And this is the number one principle that I need to teach you. And so I drew on my board here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this thermostat. And that's what I want you to understand what the adrenals are. They're a thermostat. They are an indicator of the impact that the environment and stress is placing on your body. No more or no less. You need to start thinking about that as the number one principle is that your adrenals are basically a thermostat to how stress is impacting your body. So let's kind of go forward in that. If I take the mentality of it's my adrenals, they're broken, I gotta fix them, I'm not looking at the temperatures that are causing the thermostat to register different types of information. So it's like saying, well, let's fix this thermostat right away. Let's not worry about the environment and the heat that's causing it to go so high, or let's not worry about the cold that's causing it go so low. Maybe if we just sort of fix the thermostat, and in your case, if we just give the adrenals some adaptogens, or we give the adrenals some DHEA, or we give the adrenals what else do we give it? Licorice root or Seraphoss or whatever it is. If we give the adrenals these things, we'll fix the problem. And that would be the equivalent to saying, well, if we just kind of, tamper with this thermostat, we'll fix the problem. And it completely ignores the environmental impacts that are causing. So think of the adrenals as basically a thermostat or an awareness of stress. And this is really more than just one principle, to be quite honest with you. It's a whole new way of looking at stress. And I think Hans would be really, really proud of me because I'm sort of carrying the torch. So that's the first thing, is the adrenals are your awareness thermostat of stressors. But it's awareness thermostat on an organ level. And the organ level is the actual gland. All right, so it's not necessarily an organ, but it's a gland. And we want to know there's more than just one level in our body that we need to be aware about, or we need to have a thermostat about. And a lot of the times what we'll do is we'll swim downstream. So if you can see this beautiful, you'll see this beautiful river, and we swim downstream. And we go to number one, and we'll say, let's look at the systems. Let's look at the awareness of the way stress is placing on our systems. So we'll look at the digestive system, we'll look at the detoxification system, we'll look at the respiratory system, the hormonal system. We'll look at systems, and we'll try to understand our awareness. Am I tired? Do I have brain fog? Do I have shortness of breath? Do I have gas, bloating, constipation, diarrhea? And we go from doctor to doctor and trying to be told, are our blood tests normal? Are they not normal? I don't get it. I don't feel good, but you're telling me my tests are normal. What's going on? And unfortunately, what's happened is you yourself have lost awareness in what's going on with your body from the stressors that are occurring from outside of the body and the impact that that's placing inside the body. So what do we need to do? We need to have awareness where we're actually swimming back upstream, and we need to start thinking of it not just at the system level and not just at the organ level, but now the tissue level. So what do I mean by that? Well, tissues, we know, they make up the organ, and then we also know that cells make up the tissue. So we have to actually swim back upstream to become aware of the impact that stressors are placing on the cellular level. And that's the number one principle if you want to recover with an adrenal fatigue nightmare, is that your adrenals are great at telling you what kind of stress impact, environment, toxins, chemicals, psychosocial stress, physical injuries, what else? Spiritual stuff. All of these things that are registering at the organ level and the system level, but how many of us swim back upstream to understand the impact that it's having at the cellular and tissue level? Not a lot of us. And we know a lot more than Hans Selye did. He actually did some pretty cruel research. He put mice and rats on the top of a building and where it was freezing cold weather, and he would look and try to figure out what kind of physiological changes were occurring on the body. And this is in the 50s and 60s and I think 70s, and he found three major things. He found that the thymus got really, I think he found that it got big. I'll have to read it again. He also found that the gastrointestinal system eroded, and then he also saw the impact of the adrenals, that they shrunk. So he saw that, but he wasn't able to, swim upstream to the cellular level. So that's what we need to understand, is the awareness at the cellular level. And so what does that mean? We have to have awareness as to the impact that our body is able to do in terms of making energy. And that comes from the mitochondrial level. And the mitochondrial level is basically the equivalent to the adrenals at the organ level. The mitochondria is the equivalent to the adrenals at the cellular level. And so I want you guys to start understanding the impact that the environment is placing on your body. And that's really who I work with nowadays, are people that are going to start to use their body as a study of one and understand, okay, what kind of stressors are you living on a daily basis? And how are they impacting you? Are they impacting you in terms of heart rate? Are they impacting you in terms of shortness of breath? Are they impacting you in terms of clarity of thought? Are they impacting you in terms of energy throughout the day? You need to start understanding that awareness, but we need to swim upstream and think of it not just from the organ gland level. We need to start thinking of it at the cellular level. So how do we do that? That's the question you're probably asking now. Well, we first have to understand that. So I've done adrenal tests with patients before, and I remember specifically one patient got really, really mad at me, and she was like, well, this doesn't tell me anything. I was like, well, what do you mean? We're putting a mirror up in front of you and showing you exactly how much stress has been impacting your body. And she says, well, this is not telling me what's doing it, what's responsible for that. And I was like, well, the thermostat is not telling you, like, what is the actual stressor that's causing it to register high. Yes, we can think of the sun and heat is causing that. So we can think, in your case, stress is causing your adrenal glands to be fatigued and tired. But she was mad at me, and she was like, well, I don't get why I did this test then. I was like, well, this is a good marker for us to figure out where you are. And so back to those stages of stress, Hans Selye and a lot of other adrenal fatigue practitioners will tell you you're stage 5, you're stage 4, you're stage 6. What the tests tell us nowadays is it tells us what's going on with the system level. So it tells us, is the liver working properly? Is it breaking down hormones? Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul? Is there impact on inflammation? Are the adrenals keeping up with demand and supply? Are they dipping into a savings account? I mean, it gives us a lot of information as to how to triage, meaning how can I give you some support today while we work upstream and figure out what's going on from the cellular level, and figure out, is our mitochondria shifting the way that it's making energy? Is it putting the gas pedal on one system, like fighting inflammation, and putting the brake on another pedal in terms of slowing down the thyroid? Because that's what happens is thyroid, adrenals, other reproductive systems, neurotransmitters, all of those get put on hold at the cellular level because the mitochondria has to conserve energy to be able to just keep up with making cells for existence, for oxygen and for glucose and for energy production. So hopefully that makes sense to you. I didn't mean to rattle right through that for you guys. I would love to answer questions. I'm glad, Sarah, it makes sense to you. Dina, you have days I feel amazing and literally the next day I feel like crap. Is this typical? My cortisol levels was 3 from blood work. You know what? That's a really good sign of maladaptive adrenals. I got that on the Facebook post. People were asking, I don't handle stress the same way that I used to. Is that indicative of adrenal problems? And I would say, yes, it is indicative. We have good days and bad days where we're not able to keep up with all of the environmental changes that are going on in our body. And that's a really important point. I wanted to talk about that too. So think about thermostats and think about adrenals as being basically a measurer of the way that your body processes information. So think about how amazing the body is. So the body basically has to keep a certain tightly regulated temperature. It's got to keep a certain tightly regulated pulse rate. It's got to keep a certain regulated blood pressure and pH and acidity levels. And it's got to keep a certain regulated chemicals and balance of electrolytes. It's got to work really, really hard to maintain that fine line. And so from the cellular level, when we have stress and we have chemicals and we have mortgages and we have little Johnny and we have a boss that sucks and we have pesticides that are in the foods and we have GMOs and we have heavy metals and mercuries and we have processed foods and depleted nutrients. When we have all of these things, guess what happens is the body's not able to regulate that internal environment anymore. And when that happens, all of a sudden from the system level, we get tired, we get fatigued, we can't concentrate, we can't focus. We have one good day and we're pretty good with doing it, but then we get an unexpected stress expense. Like, think about, you have some money in your wallet, it's enough to get you through the day, but all of a sudden you find out that, you know, the brakes or the transmission goes, and then all of a sudden that wipes you out. That's what's going on with the cellular impact of the body and the system levels and the organ levels and the tissue levels. I'm hoping that makes sense to you guys. So what happens is the body's no longer able to adapt. It's no longer able to keep a fine-tuned machine so that it's pristine. And so blood pressure is regulated, blood sugar is regulated, oxygen concentration is regulated, immune cells are regulated, pH levels are balanced, electrolytes are good, cofactors are available, nutrients are being processed and delivered. Does that make sense? That's what happens, is the body is no longer able to maintain its internal environment because of the external environment. And we really didn't plan on all of these things impacting us and bombarding us with stimulation at the rate that it is. I mean, we never anticipated chemicals in the environment and pollutants and pesticides and sprays and xenobiotics and medications and stressors. We just didn't anticipate all of this. So the real goal and the real solution is to get back to basics and heal from the cellular level, heal from the tissue level, heal from the organ level and the system level. So I hope that made a lot of sense to you. The number one principle, I'll sum up one more time, is basically the adrenal glands are an organ/system level, and it's a barometer or thermostat to how stress is impacting us at the body and how it's how we're unable to adapt. And what we need to do is we need to swim upstream to the cellular implications and the cellular thermostat and understand how it's impacting our ability to regenerate and to heal and to repair and to break down and to build up and to be able to thrive. I hope that made a lot of sense to you guys. So anyways, what else do we have here? How do you start help supporting your body when supplements just make you sick? You know, that's a great question. You have to put a prioritization system to it, Hope. You got to look at it like you're baking a cake. You can't just go ahead and put, you know, the icing on the eggs that haven't even been cracked yet, and you can't go ahead and preheat the oven when you haven't even mixed the batter yet. So there's a time and a place for things, and if you start now, I like the idea of using your body as a study of one, but the problem is that you need some sophisticated information plus the study of one. So here's a good analogy I'm going to use for you. Guess what happens when we are, let's say with the weather trackers, and there's a hurricane, and there's a, let's say they still put in all of these variables, and they say the wind and the temperature and the speed at which it's going at and how wide the area is. And then they'll show you all these algorithms of the cone is going through here and going through here and going through there. At the end of the day, they only have an algorithm of what the charted path is. It's not 100% exact science. Or the other day I watched a special where a guy fell off a boat and his first mate woke up a couple hours later and saw that he wasn't on the boat anymore. And so he hailed the Coast Guard, and they said that all of the computer information that they put in there found out that it has a mile radius of Rhode Island is what they were going to be searching for. And so the guy who was the first mate saw, oh my goodness, it looks like the handle like broke off, and he was probably trying to move a cooler, and that cooler would have only been moved because it was overhanging a box that we need to get ready for when we start doing a certain task of our boat. So they kind of reverse engineered that. It must have happened a couple hours later when they would have been at a certain area in the water. So they narrowed the search, and they found the guy. And so what does that have to do with anything is what you're asking. What that has to do is that the more information that you can provide, the more likelihood you can have on narrowing your search. So if you can provide what's going on with your immune system, if you can provide what's going on with your hormones, if you can provide what's going on with your blood sugar, if you can provide what other stressors you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, if you can provide what kind of environmental toxins, what kind of life that you're living, you can start narrowing a path, and then you can start putting a protocol together and start, honing in on a real small area. And then that way you can start coming up with a sequence, a recipe as to here's our charted path. We're going to go forward. Here's our goal of what we want to do. I want to live my life again. I want to have a meaningful relationship. I don't want to have people depend on me, or I don't want to have to depend on people to feed me. I don't want to lose any limbs because of diabetes. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to earn an income. I want to get my life back. I want to do the things that I want to do. Okay, that's your goal. Where are you now? And chart the progress and put it in a sequential order, and understand that there is a barometer of how information is impacting you from a system level, from a gland or organ level, from a tissue level, and from a cellular level. And the more you get information back and you try, the more you get a better course and end up getting to the end result. So hopefully that made sense to you, and that's pretty much what we do with our protocols. I'm going to scroll back up to see what other questions we have. How do you help support when you're so sick? Is heavy exercise, mountain biking, taking away from recovery? It depends. I mean, again, it depends on, what's the cell doing? Is it producing energy effectively, or is it using the raw materials that's at a premium to be able to just fight the daily battles? And so I do believe that we need to do some form of activity for feeling good and conscious and endorphin rushes and feeling productive. But at the same time, if you do too much, it can be counterproductive. It can be a double-edged sword. We said that. How do you start helping the cells? There's a lot of things you can do. Awareness is number one. Take an inventory and try to figure out what are all your weak links. What are all the stressors that are impacting you, and what can you do to be resourceful and remove yourself from these stressors, relationships and encounters and inhalants and chemicals and pollutants and foods that you eat and waters that you drink and things that you put on your body. I mean, you don't have to be neurotic about it, but you need awareness. You need to start understanding the thermostat of how things are impacting you and start from that point of view, not start putting icing on a cake that hasn't even cracked an egg yet. How do you stop adrenaline surges and or heart pounding from waking you up numerous times at night? Circadian rhythm is no longer working normally. That's a big problem. I mean, I look mainly at someone's blood sugar levels. And a lot of people say, well, I eat really healthy. I don't eat gluten. I don't eat a lot of carbs. And I'm not talking about blood sugar level from that level. I'm talking about receptors on cell membranes listening to the messages that insulin is signaling. And if they're not, then you're going to have surges, and you're going to have a roller coaster ride. And now you're going to start recruiting adrenaline and neurotransmitters, and you're going to be lit up like a Christmas tree. That's kind of what's going on there. Michael, hey Michael, hope you're doing well. Glad you joined us. And then last one here is, does adrenal fatigue ever heal completely? That's a great question, Glenda. The way I look at adrenal fatigue healing is, I would say yes, it does. But it's a verb. It's nothing that you just sit up on the top of the mountain, cross your arms, and recline and say, ha, I beat ya. It just doesn't work that way, because guess what? An environment is always going to be impacting you. You're always going to have stressors that are impacting you. The best saying that I've ever heard in terms of health, it was Dr. Ben Lynch, and you guys may know him from MTHFR and methylation, and he says one of the things he first learned while he was in naturopathic college was his professor said that cancer is a verb, it's not a noun. And I would tell you, Glenda, that adrenal fatigue is a verb. It's not a noun. It's not just the adrenals. It's impacting you on all levels of the body. And depending on how it's impacting you is different than how it's impacting Michael and how it's impacting me. And what your stressors are different from what his are and what mine are. But what is the same is our biochemistry is 99% the same, and I may have some genetic weak links and you may have some genetic weak links, but ultimately it's a verb that I have to make sure that I'm keeping a pristine, well-oiled, adaptive, being able to maintain a optimal homeostatic static balance on a day-to-day basis. So I tell patients detoxification is a verb. I want to make sure that I'm taking less toxins in my body and more toxins out of my body on a day-to-day basis. Balancing blood sugar is a verb. I want to make sure that I'm keeping a nicely regulated, controlled blood sugar better than I'm keeping an unregulated blood sugar value. So I guess in that regards, Glenda, it's one of those things that it can certainly be fixed. I do believe in the power of the human body. I always use the analogy, like if you look at a set of lungs of a smoker that smoked for 25 years and they stop for 5, 10, 15 years, their tissues have set down a whole new lung, and it looks nice and healthy. So the body's very, very forgiving, but there is an elastic and plastic stage saying you got to do something at some point or other. You got to be bothered enough. You got to get off your butt and you got to reclaim your life. And that's what happens is we've also lost connection with our goals and with the things that we love to do because we don't know what's wrong with us, and no one's telling us that anything is wrong, and we're normal and we're depressed, and you should go on antidepressant, or you should go exercise, or you should stop eating more, and no one's giving you good information, and you're confused, and you've lost the connection with your body, and you've lost what it is to feel good, and you've lost what it is to have purpose and meaning, and you've lost the little dreams that you used to think about in terms of, you know what, I've always wanted to travel, I've always wanted to write a book, or I've always wanted to have a meaningful second half of my life. But what happens is we get fear, and then we pay the cost of not doing anything, interpreting that as being less expensive than the cost of fixing it. However, what's more expensive is the cost of not doing anything, and that's when we have to overcome the fear. So kind of digressed on that, but I did that out of love because I really feel that it can be helped. What else do we got here? Allison, you're telling me, what are some signs my adrenals are healed and I'm okay to quit the adaptogens? That's a good question. I would probably say depending on what test you've already done, blood work's always great, and we like to look at it from a functional range. So we like to look at all of the CBC values. We like to look at liver and cardiovascular values, inflammatory values. If you want to get real fancy, you may want to look at I guess you could look at pathogen values and adrenal values, but your body will tell you, you'll feel like you can accomplish more, your goals. That's probably the best way. Like, what are you not doing because of your health problems still? Are you not doing this? Are you not doing that? Are you not doing this? You're not doing that? If you're still not doing a lot of things, then there's a good chance that you're not to where you want to be. Are hormone supplements necessary, or can other measures balance hormones? It depends, Rebecca. Some of them can be necessary. Some people just, if they get let's say they get a hysterectomy at a very young age and they have a lot of immune breakdown and their progesterone levels are really, really low, there's a time and a place. And a lot of people don't know this, but I'm actually from a traditional medical family. So I'm sort of the weirdo, holistic, kook out there, and my family we're all medical doctors and medical minded, and I do think that there's a time and a place for that. And if you can marry the holistic component with the time and the place for certain things, that no matter what you do holistically, you're still going to be, a couple pennies short of a dollar, then you're going to need to use some of those. And that's where understanding your body and understanding, setting the trajectory and putting an algorithm together and testing it and seeing what it happens, and then going forward and seeing if you're getting closer to your goal or further from your goal. So hopefully that made sense. How are we doing here? I'm going to go a couple more questions. Do you believe in mineral balancing? How important are minerals? Hey, Jen, mineral balancing is really, really important. I know that they do a lot of hair mineral analysis. I almost got into it myself, but then I became more nerdy and I got into the genetic component. And the more I got into the genetics and the biochemistry and, Krebs cycle and all that kind of stuff, the way energy is produced, the more I realized it has more to do with stress and what's causing these biochemistry things to spill in the first place. But back to your questions, mineral analysis is really, really important. There's some awesome people out there that do that stuff. Minerals are very important because they help with reactions in our body. And if we have heavy metal toxicities, they'll displace those minerals, and now all of a sudden enzymes aren't detoxing, enzymes aren't creating energy, enzymes aren't making hormones, enzymes aren't breaking down stuff, and then you're feeling brain foggy, and it's really important. I hope that answered that question. So anyways, oops, just had a little spillage there. If that's it, I will complete our Facebook Live. If you have any more questions, type it in now. I will answer, let's say, a couple more questions. And if not, then I will come up with another title for my Facebook Live session, which we'll do next Tuesday at 7:15. If not, if I don't have any more questions, then that will be it. And Teresa, I hope you're doing well. Thank you for coming and joining, and I look forward to when we speak next. And that's it. So you're welcome, Rebecca, and I hope you guys got a lot out of this today, and I hope that we gave you hope. I hope that we have changed your paradigm and made you realize that it's not just about fixing the adrenals per se. You're welcome, Michael, and hey, Melissa, I hope you're doing well as well. And that's it, guys. So have a wonderful evening. Another good thing is to count your blessings and be grateful for the things that you do have, because along the way we forget to celebrate. We forget to understand the things that we do accomplish, and we get so fixated at the end result that we lose that awareness of the things that we do have. Brittany, is adrenals always accurate on blood work? You mean cortisol? Cortisol is like ridiculous in terms of if it's not super high or super low, you're basically told it's normal. And I will never really even look at cortisol levels on a blood work, because I just think that they're ridiculous ways to assess everything that we talked about today. So anyways, I hope that's it. I got to run, and I hope you guys have a great evening. Take care.